Andrew Cash is a Juno Award-winning musician and a celebrated member of Canada's arts and culture scene. He is also the newly elected Member of Parliament for the riding of Davenport in downtown Toronto. Now, why would Andrew Cash leave such an interesting job to run for public office? Well, that's coming up right now on Beyond Politics. Andrew Cash, welcome to Beyond Politics. Great to have you here.
Oh, well, thanks for having me.
So tell me how much sleep you're getting lately. You are a new MP. You have a 2-month-old child. Are you getting any rest at all?
Well, I'm getting about as much rest now as I did before the 2-month-old was born.
Really?
Yeah.
Is that because you're in Ottawa and your wife is at home with the baby?
Yeah, you should really be asking her this question.
Yeah.
I don't know how she's doing it. Yeah.
So how many children do you have?
4.
You have 4. So your oldest is 20, 19 or 20?
20. Just turned 20.
Okay, and then your newborn here.
Yeah.
Wow, that's something. Can you rely on your oldest child for babysitting duties, or is
it's becoming more sporadic the older he gets.
Okay, good.
But there was a certain point where it was babysitting on demand.
Right.
He had no choice.
Okay. So basically the situation you've created is that either he will go and have 4 or 5 children himself, or he will remain a single man without children forever.
There is that possibility.
Yeah.
The latter.
So you... I think probably, we get to talk to a lot of members of Parliament who all have very interesting stories. But you have a particularly interesting background. I mean, you didn't study law and you don't have a degree in political science. You are a musician, frankly. So I was really interested on why, as a musician, you decided to run.
Well, I had always been politically engaged and interested and an activist in Toronto, which is where I'm from. So I was one of these kids that knew from a very early age what I wanted to do, and I wanted to play music. I wanted to be a songwriter and a singer. And I probably really knew that in about grade 10, and really got focused on that. But at the same time, I was beginning to become more engaged politically. I come from a big Catholic family, and I went to a Catholic high school where social justice and the events of the day and connecting those events to the ethos of the social gospel was kind of fundamental to my upbringing. So music, rock and roll, punk rock, the Clash, who were singing about, especially at that time in the early 80s, were singing about the liberation movements in Latin America. At the same time, the Catholic Church was grappling with these issues in a variety of different ways. Those things, that confluence, really affected me in hopefully a positive way, and so I became sort of politically active, and throughout the course of my music career, and also eventually my work as a sort of an activist journalist in Toronto, was that attempt to marry those two different passions of mine.
Tell me, it seems a little incongruous to be a young Catholic, politically engaged punk rocker. Were you supported at school, or did people think you were trouble?
I was very supported at school.
Were you?
Yeah. In fact, one of the first gigs I ever did, and my colleague here in the House of Commons, Charlie Angus, was the bass player.
Yes.
We did this together. This first gig was at my high school. And we were roundly booed, as this was an era of disco, and we were
not because of the subject matter. The lyrics,
it was
was
probably the haircuts and probably the music or lack thereof. But I have this memory that I still have it, and I'll never forget it, of one of my religion teachers coming up to me right after that to say that, and he said, "That was fantastic," and that was an example of the kind of support. I mean, it wasn't wholesale support in my high school, but among a certain part of it, was,
right.
Yeah, there was a lot of support.
How about your family?
Well, so I think music was a big part of my family.
Right.
I think my father had the kinds of concerns that I have as a father, watching my oldest son pursue a career in music, which is the practical concerns of are you going to actually be able to make a living at this?
Right.
So
will we be feeding you and housing you?
Yeah, and in a family of 8 kids, that was an important question. So I think we butted heads quite a lot over this, and it wasn't
you and your dad.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and I pursued my this career, and it actually worked out quite well.
Yeah.
And I feel very lucky too, because much like politics, music, you can work very hard at it. You can have a lot of talent. You can have some good ideas, but you also need some luck. And
I guess that's like anything in life.
It absolutely is. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So tell me about that childhood, those siblings and family life. What do you remember about your family life? Were you the kind of family that talked a lot, talked about issues, were expected to be engaged, or were you more of just a low-key family? Yeah,
well, we did talk a lot, and if some of my siblings were here, they would say that I was the cause of many dinner conversations that stretched far too long into the evening when the rest of them wanted to, be excused from the table.
Do they still say that?
They would if prodded, and there wouldn't have to be much prodding. Yeah. So I mean, so I was born in '62. So by the time the mid '70s rolled around, I mean, there was a lot of political conversations going on. And also because of my father's connection to the Catholic Church, and for him it was a certain kind of sort of pre-Vatican II church, which means sort of prior to the grand modernization of the church, if you will. That's where his sort of love of the church was, in that pre-modernization period. And that he has teenage kids growing up in schools where they're embracing the modernization. So there was
that difficult for him?
Yeah.
It was.
It definitely was.
Was it difficult for him watching you and potentially some of your other siblings take steps that didn't really reflect what he thought kids should be doing?
Absolutely. And it's interesting because I represent a very diverse riding, and I'm in new immigrant communities often, and I hear stories of particularly women who have had this challenge in their own communities to sort of pursue their paths that sometimes run counter to the dominant culture that they come from. And I've often said, well, I can relate to that because to be from a Catholic family in the 60s and 70s, there was a certain fairly rigid sense of particularly the roles of women, girls, in that structure.
Tell me a bit about your mom.
Well, my mother died when I was quite young, 10.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I can't say too much about my mother. And I think you could talk to anyone who's lost their mother at a young age. You cannot help but idealize your mother.
That's an interesting point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Then, how did her death affect you and your family moving forward? Because 8 kids is a lot of kids in any family, right? With a mom and a dad. But for your dad to then be in a position where, especially someone who seems to maybe have had a stricter view of the world, potentially, to be placed in a situation where he has to raise 8 very different kids.
Yeah. Just a point of clarification, it was 8. One of my older sisters died when she was sort of a small baby, but then, so it was 7, but then my father remarried, and my stepmother had a daughter from a previous marriage. So then we became 8 again. Okay. Right? So that's just one point of clarification.
To clarify something else, where do you place in the sibling line?
I'm roughly in the middle.
In the middle. Okay.
Yeah, I'm in the bottom half. Okay. So I like to joke with some of my friends today, and even my kids who can't imagine this ever happening. But there was a finite amount of food at dinner, so it wasn't guaranteed that you were going to get seconds. But I was in the bottom tier of the lineup for seconds, as I recall. So
it's
I have
funny,
to check my
mom,
notes, but I'm pretty sure I remember correctly.
That you never got.
Well, I was on the bottom tier. Let's just say
occasionally.
Occasionally, maybe that was it. Yeah.
My mom talks about that too. She was one of 6. Is one of 6 kids, and she said you ate fast, or you got nothing else. Yeah. You got what was on your plate, or that was it. So apparently, you just had to eat faster. Yeah,
that's right. So, but this affected my father, to the core. Yeah, absolutely. I remember the first time I actually had a direct one-on-one communication with him, because prior to that it had always been more or less through my mom, because he was working his ass off. Yeah. Was she do you remember her being a gentler person? Absolutely, and much gentler. She was the one that encouraged music in our family. Yeah. And consequently, I mean, my younger brother is, in my view, one of the best songwriters we've got here in Canada. But
he's Peter?
Yeah, Peter. Yeah. And some of my other siblings play some music, and my eldest sister is a choreographer and has been for a long time, and teaches at York now, and
So it's a pretty artistic family. Yeah. What did your mom die of?
Cancer.
Was it quick? Did your dad have much time to...
No, it was quick. It was, as I recall, about a 6-month descent, really, Yeah.
You said that your dad worked really hard, even when your mom was alive. And I can only imagine that must have increased when she was gone. How did that affect the family, too?
Well, I mean, we had a sense that we had to not create too much static, because there was already enough going on. Yeah, I think that was a big part of what I recall, that there was a lot of... I mean, when you're that age and you're going through these things, of course, you actually don't realize how tough it is. That's the amazing thing about children.
Do you mean because of age? Just because you're a kid and you just kind of...
Yeah, for
adapt.
Sure. Yeah, for sure. For example, I mean, I look at my kids today, and And I occasionally imagine them losing their mother, and it's an overwhelming thought experiment.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah.
Not one that you want to try too often.
No, but I think you end up inevitably doing that.
Yes.
If you are aware at all of your your own, you know, if you've examined your life at all, you know, if you've gone through something like that, then you can't help but think about it when you have your own children, for sure.
How did your childhood influence your music?
Well, I think that I became very determined and disciplined about what I wanted to do, and I think at a pretty young age, and maybe this had to do with my mother dying, but I understood that, you know, that things don't necessarily work out so good for people. Right. And actually, you know, I think that probably began my own, I guess. I think that probably was the thing that began to open my eyes to the realities around me and the global realities of you know, injustice and the almost randomness of that. And I think, you know, I mean, not to put too fine a point on it, and I haven't sort of identified myself as sort of, you know, some kind of tragic victim, but I have a lot of empathy for people going through a variety of personal challenges, and also I think, you know, one of the reasons that I gravitated towards social democracy and the party that expresses that in Canada, the NDP, is that sense of, well, you know, we can go through personal traumatic things, but that's inevitable, you know, for a certain percentage of a community. But you know, that there's that. But then there's, how does a community respond to those things, and do we respond to these things in a collective way, or is it every man, woman, and child for themselves? And I think that it's the question we are asking every day here in Ottawa. I think that's you know, one of the overarching political arguments and confrontations that we actually have in this country is how do we relate to each other.
Why did you decide to run?
Well, I think, you know, we've covered a lot of that ground.
And also tell me what the reaction would have been in terms of this group of people that you worked with, and you were a journalist too, and you were writing pieces for Now, but you're working with a group of people who are trying to make change through the arts world. And then you decide to take the political step. Was the reaction really positive, or was the reaction more like, what are you thinking? I think the reaction was mostly positive, and for some people it was like, oh, thank God it's not me doing this. Yeah, I think that I mean, just speaking for myself, I began to get this overwhelming feeling that you know, the general disdain for partisan politics and for what goes on here, for example, or electoral politics, let's just call it, the disdain for electoral politics is a huge problem in our society, and that I just felt more and more over the years that I needed to participate somehow in the process, in the partisan process, because ultimately that is where change happens, finally. And you look around us today, certainly in my city in Toronto, change is happening, and it's happening because of the results of an election.
changes happening across this country because of the results of the last federal election. It is important, and I feel like we need to become more engaged, and so I had these feelings, and I was trying to find those ways in, and then this opportunity really came up in part because of some of my writing in now around issues that affect around an urban agenda and the lack of attention to that I seem to be happening in our national politics. So some conversations began between myself and some of the folks in the party, and including of course my good friend Charlie Angus, and it was over the course of that this opportunity presented itself to run. And I had been more or less outside of the party. I mean, I became a member to help get Jack elected as leader of the party when he during that leadership campaign. So, but then
So it wasn't totally foreign to you.
No, it wasn't. It wasn't. That was actually my first foray into partisan politics, and I think it's important to note that for people in the arts and culture sector, especially musicians, songwriters, singers, people from the rock and roll world, partisan politics is just not the place that most of those folks can relate to, and it was a real slow, gradual
descent
journey. It was a gradual journey for me,
Yeah.
figuring out how to comb my hair and
wear a tie,
accepting the fact I had to tuck my shirt in,
yeah,
and this sort of thing.
Though you are wearing pretty cool boots.
Thank you.
For our viewers who can't see them, most people just wear the traditional loafers or lace-ups, and I guess it's pretty cool boots on. So what about your wife? I mean, you were a candidate for
really
a year and a half?
Interview, not me. Yeah, I mean, yes, I was,
okay.
and so I really did spend a lot of time before the election was called, before the writ dropped, about a year and a half, knocking on doors in my riding and opening a community office about 6 months before the election was called, going to events, organizing events. We ended up, we weren't living in the riding. We moved into the riding. It was a huge commitment on the part of my family, on the part of my wife.
Did she do it willingly? Did she see the point, or did she question it at first?
No, she and I have been doing this pretty much together. I mean, she herself is an artist. She's a painter and a potter, but she has a background in grassroots community organizing, and so she got this. The need to be doing all this work beforehand, she totally understood that, and really what we're doing in the riding, I mean, obviously she's been super busy with
having a newborn
with his avalanche of children, but we're very much doing this as a team, as a family, and I don't really know. I mean, you would know this more than just about anyone in this town, but I just don't see how you can really do this without your family being.
You can't if you want to have
supportive
and with the same spouse at the end of the
that's right.
career.
Yeah.
No, you're right. It does require the support of the whole family. Although kids are great because they actually, as you say, don't really have any idea what's going on.
That's right.
Just pretty much go with it because it's normal.
Yeah.
Do you play with the band on the Hill?
Well, I've had a few.
You and Charlie Angus have jam sessions.
Well, no one has time for that, really. But he and I have played a couple things since the election.
And I found that there are
How
some
come you
songs.
get to do all the talking?
It's okay. You get all the QP questions, Charlie. Let me talk tonight, okay? I found that some songs work better for your digestion than others. The eastern road, it is exploding.
I had no idea that actually being a singer and a songwriter and a performer would be such a bonus as a politician. And I tell you, I could go to just about every event in my riding, from anything. I could go to anything, and if I brought my guitar, people would just be so happy. And I mean, just as an example, a couple of weeks ago, I got off the plane in Toronto after the week in Ottawa, and went to an event, and I was there for literally 5 minutes, and they asked me if I'd play a song, and so.
Easy to make people happy.
Yeah, and
you don't get stage fright when you have to stand up and give a statement.
Well, yeah, I mean, if I had my guitar, it would probably be easier. But it is a way for people. It's a way in for people into. I mean, I think that people really have a sense that politicians aren't never really reveal that much about themselves, and there's a certain degree of that is true, I'd say, and in part it's because of the climate that we're in, but so
you're saying that your music allows people to feel that they can identify with you?
It sort of humanizes me as a politician, and it helps break down. I mean, music has always broken down barriers, and I mean, not to sound kind of cliche, but it's true, and I see it happening now more than ever. I mean, just growing up performing and playing music, you forget how powerful it can be for people. And it always surprises me, and it is something that I didn't expect, and I suppose I should have.
Is Parliament what you were expecting it to be?
On some levels, I didn't have huge expectations about Parliament. I was aware enough that there was some dysfunctionality within the system. If I understood that was there. I think what's really surprised me is that there's no manual for this work, right? There's really no manual. There's no way of doing this that's codified. You come in as who you are. I mean, there's a system here, but really, it's really up to you to kind of make sense of it. Of course, there's leadership and there's some mentoring, but really, when it gets right down to it, you've got to you get thrown into it, and you really have to find your way. Which I mean, it's been exciting, but it's very surprising on a certain level, because there are a lot of traditions and there are rules, right? But
it's like being in Catholic high school again.
Well, there is a little bit of that, actually. There is a little bit of that, in more ways than we can probably go into here.
I really appreciate that you take the time to be here. It's been a pleasure to chat with you and learn a bit more about you and your family as well. Thank you for taking the time.
Well, thanks for having me.